Welcome back. We're talking about, well, what can you do if you're in an abusive relationship? Let me read one of the reviews. This is by I Don't Understand from the United States. I am grateful for your messages on your podcast. My husband is 59 and has been diagnosed with dementia, and it has been life-changing for us. I would love the chance to be able to change this situation for him and to be able to help him more than just giving in and letting it take its course.
It's so sad.
We so believe that too, which is what I wrote about in Memory Rescue. There has to be a way to give back some of his life. And the short answer is you want to prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors that steal your mind. And that's the whole bright minds that we've talked about over and over again on our podcast. Another one from the Lucky Madness from the United States. I appreciate this podcast so much. Listening to them are reminders to keep making healthy decisions. The addiction discussions are the best. Unique and compassionate discussions are so important.
Awesome.
We didn't tell that story of the 8-year-old girl who is growing up in an addicted family. And the 8-year-old is so wanting to take care of her,
she's the caretaker
of her mother and father. So no matter what it is they do, she immediately
wants to make it better.
forgives them and wants to make it better. And in having a discussion with her mom, I was saying, I really need you to think about your behavior, because what you're doing is you're teaching her that it's okay.
In fact, it's normal.
It's normal to be in an abusive relationship where
you lie for people, where you help them when they are hungover, strung out, whatever.
Where you become codependent, so they have the addiction with you.
And you enable it.
So the question is, what do you do?
So, yeah, I think it's really important that we spend one more minute on that, because one of the things that happens in those relationships is people think that their behavior is normal, and they force it, which I think is abusive, on the rest of the family. So, addiction is just a bear, and I grew up with it in my family. And the lying becomes so pervasive that no one's quite sure what's a lie and what's not. And pretty soon it just destroys the relationship to where anyone who is somewhat healthy just never trusts you anymore. They just don't. And so there's this constant wedge between you and the person who's addicted, and you're weary. You're just always weary, and you never trust. And there's just this sadness that goes along with it, and you're exhausted. And it just ruins that bond. But with kids in a family like that, when they're forced to lie, and we talked about this in I think the first episode this week. You talked about how one of the signs of abuse, or maybe it was the last episode. One of the signs of abuse is when you force or coerce people to do something, right? And with children, in order to cover addiction, parents often force or coerce their kids to cover up for them. And one of the things they do is they threaten. And you talked about this in a different way, but it's the same thing, same concept. They'll threaten by saying, if you tell anyone, we will lose our home. I think you said, if you tell anyone, we'll kill your parents. But it's the same concept. If you tell anyone, you'll get taken away from me.
And it'll be your fault.
It'll be your fault.
As opposed
that you'll get taken away, you'll get put into foster care, we'll lose our home, like all of these things. And so kids are constantly scared and terrified and covering for their parents, and that becomes their normal. In fact, I've heard them shrug their shoulders and just go, it's just normal. And that breaks my heart to hear a child say it's normal, because I can see.
Because a lot of people will wonder, well, why would she stay with someone who's abusive, or why would he stay with someone who's abusive? And that's one of
Because
the
they grew
big
up.
answers, because they grew up thinking it's their fault, they're responsible, and if only they were better than their mom, their dad, their husband, their wife, their boss, wouldn't be the way they
Or
are.
maybe their parents
And
were
so
put into.
that's the first thing you do, because we're going to talk about, well, what do you do if you're in an abusive relationship? The first thing is to be honest with yourself and recognize that this relationship is not
Well,
healthy.
and you might need help with that, because if you did grow up in that environment, and let's just say you were put into foster care, or your parents were put in jail, or died, or something happened to them, it might be so deep you might not be able to recognize it or admit it when.
Right, and that's where therapy can be very helpful. But
'Cause that was
you
too
don't
painful.
want a therapist that just believes everything you say.
No.
You want one that'll challenge you. And what I find is so important is when I'm hearing about someone who's abusive, I want them in my office. I want to meet them so I can make an independent assessment. And, perhaps they have untreated bipolar disorder, or they have borderline personality
It's
disorder,
never usually
or
simple.
they have ADD, or they've had a head trauma. And, I think when I was the director of the domestic violence unit at Fort Irwin, I learned, so I would typically get women in my office, wives in my office, telling me how awful the husband was. And I found when I got the husband in the office,
talk about how awful
I
she
got
is?
more information. And then what I often found is there was an untreated ADD, dyslexic, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, Asperger-ish kid at home stoking the fire
Stirring it up.
between them. And so if mom was drinking or dad was drinking or dad had a head injury, you see
Explosion.
how complicated this gets. Is so as a therapist, I wanted all of the
Right, treat the family.
information so that I could make better recommendations.
So before we talk about the healthy things you can do, I know two of the unhealthy things you can do, because I've certainly done it. One of them is to become like the child we talked about, who is codependent, enabling. Right, she might grow up to go into an abusive relationship, more than likely, which we see so often. The other one is to become like me, which was just build a wall, don't let any of them in, push them all away. You're all crazy, stay out there. And I'm not sure that that's much healthier. So it's almost an attachment issue especially with family, because you don't trust any of them. So
we're back to the Black Widow story.
it's not a Black Widow. I'm not a Black Widow. But with family, they weren't trustworthy, right? So, but both of those are extremes. So I think recognizing, I did therapy. I did like a lot of therapy
Well, and I
on
think
that.
that really helped, because the whole Black Widow stuff, people aren't going to know. When we were first together, almost 13 years ago, she'd come and then she'd go and she'd come back and then she'd go, and I'm like, you're a Black
I was
Widow.
never doing the
and
relationship
then
thing
after
again.
about a year and a half, she came and stayed, so I call myself the Black Widow tamer.
Now you're not going anywhere.
And right, she says the only reason she's running is if she's chasing
Right.
me. And as you already know, I'm on her phone. She knows where I am at every minute of every day. So
You put yourself on that. To clarify for the people who didn't hear the other shows this week, he put himself on the app. I did not force him to be on there. You want to be here.
Say? Oh, no question. I am in this Black Widow cage with you.
It is consensual.
All right. What can people do?
So those are the unhealthy things.
You can get therapy.
Yes.
Therapy can be
So incredibly helpful. EMDR
but you
was.
want to see it from a family systems standpoint, not I'm good, he's bad, or
Right.
I'm good, she's bad. Because if you get that mindset, you're a victim and you can't change anything. It's what is it I can do today to make this better. You also want to build appropriate boundaries and assertiveness. One of our favorite books is from our friend John Townsend
Love
and
his
Henry Cloud,
books. Yeah.
called Boundaries. It
Yeah.
sold millions of copies.
Like 3 million copies.
And that is something we clearly recommend. It's okay for you to say, this is okay, this is not okay, and to draw respectful boundaries in your life. So get help, boundaries, assertiveness. We actually teach people how to treat us by what we allow in our lives, by what we accept.
So I love a saying that you have. Okay. Some people are afraid to go into this because it's scary and it's painful to go into it initially for a lot of people who have experienced pain in their past. Sometimes you don't do it for yourself. Sometimes you do it out of love for someone else. And I know for me, when I didn't want to dig into the past. Like I said, I built this, not only walls, but facades. And it was just, I wanted to keep it out there. And so, but I had to step back. And I'm like, number one, do I really want to keep pushing people away from me? Like, I had this great guy, I had you. And I'm like, do I really want to keep doing that? That was a draw, but it might not have been a big enough draw at the time. But I had a child. And what scared me, I was able to step back enough and look at it from a distance. I have this 30-foot perspective thing that I do, like my meditation, to look at it from 30,000 feet and check it out. It's like, am I going to really be a good mom if I keep pushing people away from me? And you might not think you're going to do that, but you will. And
so you have to find your motivation to get
sometimes
healthy.
It's not about you. Sometimes it's about the people you love.
You know, the other thing that's really important is understand it from a neuroscience perspective. In my book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, I actually talk about relationships based on different brain systems. I talk about what they do, what happens when things go wrong, how to fix it. And I've had so many people in abusive relationships tell me that they recognize themselves or the other person. And once we balance both of their brains, that their relationship became so much better. And so brain science can really be helpful. And in virtually no domestic violence programs does anybody talk about scanning people's brains or optimizing brain health. It's one of the things we're really trying to change here at Amen Clinics, that we think brain health should be central to any form of psychiatry or psychotherapy, because when your brain works right, you work right. You're more empathic, you're more thoughtful, you can see things from other people's points of view.
Yep.
So we hope this has been really helpful for you. To learn more, I think getting John Townsend and Henry Cloud's book, Boundaries, can be just so helpful for you. And of course, we want you to read The Brain Warrior's Way and The Brain Warrior's Way cookbook. Stay with us. Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warrior's Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of The Brain Warrior's Way and The Brain Warrior's Way cookbook we give away every month.